The corridor was too quiet. Sergeant David Mitchell had been a royal guard for 16 years. He knew the sounds of Kensington Palace like he knew his own heartbeat. The echo of footsteps on marble, the distant hum of conversation from staff quarters, the soft tick of the antique clocks that lined the hallways. But this silence was different. It pressed against his chest like a warning. David stood at his post outside the children's wing, his red uniform crisp and perfect, his bearskin hat casting shadows across his weathered face. His hand rested near his ceremonial sword, though, after all these years, he knew the real threats never came with weapons. They came with words, with power, with people who believed their position made them untouchable. Through the tall windows, afternoon sunlight painted golden squares on the floor. It should have felt peaceful. But David's instincts were screaming that something was wrong. Then he heard it, its voice, sharp, angry, coming from the playroom down the hall. A man's voice. And then, quieter, the sound of a child trying not to cry. David's jaw tightened. He knew that child's voice. Prince Louis, 6 years old. A sweet kid who always asked David about his uniform buttons and whether they were real gold. Before we go further, if you love stories about everyday heroes standing up for what's right, hit that subscribe button. You won't believe what happens next. David moved down the corridor. Not running. Palace guards never ran unless there was genuine danger. But his steps were quick, purposeful. The playroom door was slightly open. David could see inside. Prince Louis stood near the toy shelves, his small frame tense, his face red. Tears streamed down his cheeks, but he was biting his lip, trying so hard to be brave. Standing over him was Tom Parker Bowles, Queen Camilla's son, a man in his late 40s with the kind of confidence that came from a lifetime of privilege, and he was yelling at a 6-year-old child. "You need to learn respect," Tom said, his voice cutting. "You can't just take things that don't belong to you. That watch was expensive. Do you understand expensive?" Louise's voice was small, broken. "I didn't take it. I didn't touch anything. Don't lie to me. The staff said they saw you near my coat. Now the watch is missing. I didn't take it." Louis's voice cracked. "I promise. I wouldn't." Tom stepped closer, looming, using his size to intimidate. "You're going to tell me the truth, or I'll make sure your parents know exactly what kind of little thief you're becoming." Is that word thief? Thrown. At a 6-year-old prince by a man who should have known better. David had seen enough. He stepped through the doorway, his presence filling the room. "Mr. Parker Bowles," David said, his voice calm, but carrying the weight of authority. "I need to ask you to step back from His Royal Highness." Tom turned, surprise flickering across his face before it hardened into irritation. "Excuse me. This is a private family matter. With respect, sir, this is a child under royal protection, and I'm observing behavior that concerns me." Tom's face flushed red. "Are you seriously telling me what I can and cannot do? Do you know who I am?" "Yes, sir, I do." David didn't move, didn't blink. "And I know that Prince Louis is 6 years old and visibly distressed. So I'm asking again. Please step back." For a moment, the room held its breath. Tom looked at David, then at Louis, then back at David. The calculation was visible in his eyes. He was weighing power, position, consequences. "This isn't over," Tom said finally, his voice low and dangerous. "You just made a very big mistake, Sergeant." He brushed past David and out of the room, his footsteps echoing down the corridor. David waited until the sound faded completely. Then he knelt beside Louis, bringing himself to the child's eye level. "You all right, Your Highness?" Louis wiped his eyes quickly, trying to compose himself the way royal children were taught. But his voice shook. "I didn't take his watch. I promise I didn't." "I believe you," David said gently. "Can you tell me what happened?" Louis took a shaky breath. "I was playing with my cars." He came in and started looking through his coat pockets. Then he got really angry and said his watch was gone. He said, "I must have taken it because I was the only one in this hallway. Were you near his coat?" "No, I was over here the whole time. I didn't even know he left his coat in here." David nodded slowly. Something about this didn't add up. Tom Parker Bowles didn't usually leave belongings in the children's playroom, and accusing a 6-year-old of theft seemed extreme, even for someone with a temper. Unless it wasn't about the watch at all. Unless this was about something else entirely. "Your Highness," David said carefully, "has Mr. Parker Bowles spoken to you like this before?" Louis hesitated. The kind of hesitation that told David everything he needed to know. Sometimes Louis whispered, "When Mummy and Daddy aren't around, he says I need to learn my place. That just because I'm a prince doesn't mean I'm special."
Hey, David.
Felt anger rise in his chest. Cold, controlled. The kind of anger that came from 16 years of watching powerful people hurt those who couldn't defend themselves. "You were special, Your Highness," David said firmly, "and no one has the right to speak to you that way. No one." Louis looked up at him with eyes too serious for a 6-year-old. "Will you get in trouble for telling him to stop?" David smiled, though inside he knew the answer was probably yes. "Now don't worry about me. I'm going to make sure you're safe. That's my job." But as David stood and watched Louis return to his toys, trying to pretend everything was normal, he knew this was only the beginning. Tom Parker Bowles wasn't the type to accept. Being challenged by a palace guard, and the battle that was coming would test everything David believed about duty, honor, and standing up for what was right, even when the cost might be everything he'd worked for. 20 minutes later, David stood in the security office, filling out his incident report. His hand was steady as he wrote. Every detail. Every word Tom had said. The tears on Louis's face. The way the man had loomed over a child half his size. Sergeant Rachel Torres sat at the desk across from him. She was younger than David, only 5 years on palace duty, but sharp as they came. "You really did it, didn't you?" she said quietly. "You challenged Camilla's son. I did my job. Your job is to stand guard, not get involved in family disputes." David looked up. A grown man was intimidating a 6-year-old. That's not a family dispute. That's bullying. And it happened under our watch. Rachel sighed. "I'm not disagreeing with you, David. I'm just saying you know how this works. Tom Parker Bowles has the Queen Consort's ear. He can make your life hell. Let him try." Ow. But David's confidence wavered as the afternoon wore on. First came the summons. "Report to the Chief of Palace Security immediately." Commander Peter Walsh was a career military man. 60 years old with a face carved from stone, he'd served under 3 monarchs and had a reputation for being fair but ruthless when crossed. David knocked and entered. Walsh didn't look up from the papers on his desk. "Sergeant Mitchell." "Sit down." David sat, back straight, hands folded. Walsh finally looked up, his expression unreadable. "I've received a formal complaint from Tom Parker Bowles. He claims you were insubordinate, overstepped your authority, and interfered in a private family matter." "Sir, with respect, that's not accurate." "Then tell me what happened, and don't leave anything out." David recounted everything. The yelling, the tears, the accusation of theft. The way Tom had used his size to intimidate a small child. Walsh listened without interrupting. When David finished, the room fell silent. "You believe Prince Louis is telling the truth?" Walsh asked finally. "Yes, sir, completely." "And you believe Tom Parker Bowles was deliberately targeting the boy?" "I do, sir. This wasn't about a missing watch. This felt personal." Walsh leaned back in his chair, studying David with eyes that had seen too many palace battles. "You've been here 16 years. You have an impeccable record. Not a single complaint. 3 commendations for excellence. Thank you, sir. Which is why what I'm about to tell you is so bloody difficult." Walsh's tone hardened. "Tom Parker Bowles wants you dismissed. He's demanding your immediate removal from palace duty." David felt the words hit like a physical blow. On what grounds? Insubordination. Overreach of authority, creating hostile conditions for visiting family members. Walsh's expression showed his disgust with the charges. "It's rubbish, of course. But it's coming from someone with significant influence.
What about Louis?
What about what he said to that child? There's no proof. It's your word against his. And unfortunately, in this palace, some words carry more weight than others. David's hands clenched. So that's it? He gets away with terrorizing a 6-year-old because his mother is the queen consort? I didn't say that. Walsh stood and walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back. I said that's what he's demanding. I didn't say I was going to give it to him. Hope flickered in David's chest. You're not dismissing me? Not yet. But you need to understand what you're up against. Walsh turned. Tom Parker Bowles is already spreading his version of events. By tomorrow morning, half the palace will believe you're a guard who doesn't know his place. The other half will be watching to see what happens to you. I can handle rumors, sir. It's not just rumors, David. This is about power. About who controls the narrative in this palace. Shh. Walsh's voice dropped. Prince William and Princess Catherine are away in Scotland. They won't be back for 3 days. Until then, you're vulnerable. What should I do? Your job. Nothing more, nothing less. Document everything. Stay professional. And for God's sake, avoid Tom Parker Bowles. David left the office feeling like he'd survived the first round of a fight he hadn't asked for, but the real battle was just beginning. That evening, David returned to his post outside the children's wing. The palace felt different now, colder. He could feel the stares from other staff members as he passed. Some supportive, many worried. Rachel found him during the shift change. Word spreading, she said quietly. Tom's been talking to anyone who'll listen. He's saying you're a rogue guard who threatened him. That you're dangerous? That's a lie. I know, but lies travel faster than truth in this place. She glanced around to make sure they were alone. There's something else. Tom's been asking questions about you. Your schedule. Your routines. It's like he's building a case. David's jaw tightened. Let him. I didn't do anything wrong. Being right doesn't always protect you. David, you know that? Before David could respond, a door opened down the hallway. Louis emerged with his nanny, dressed in pajamas, ready for bed. When he saw David, his face brightened. Sergeant Mitchell. Louis hurried over, his nanny following at a respectful distance. Did you get in trouble? Because of me? David knelt down. No, Your Highness. And even if I did, it wouldn't be because of you. You didn't do anything wrong, Tom said. You'd be fired. He said I'd never see you again. David felt anger flare. Tom had gone to Louis after the incident. Deliberately frightened him. Tom was wrong, David said gently. I'm not going anywhere. I'll be right here, doing my job, keeping you safe. Louis hugged him suddenly, a quick, tight embrace that broke about a dozen protocols. Thank you for believing me. About the watch, I'll always believe you, Your Highness. Always. As Louis and his nanny continued toward the royal bedrooms, Rachel spoke softly. You realize you just made a promise you might not be able to keep? I know, and you're still going to fight for it? David looked at her, his expression resolute. A 6-year-old child is being bullied by a man 3 times his size. That child trusted me to protect him. So yes, Rachel, I'm going to fight. Because if I don't, who will? Rachel nodded slowly. Then you should know you're not alone. Some of us remember why we took this job. It wasn't to serve politics. It was to serve and protect the royal family. The real one. The children. She walked away, leaving David alone in the corridor. He resumed his post, standing guard as the palace settled into evening quiet, but his mind was racing. Tom Parker Bowles had power, influence. The backing of the queen consort, David had a uniform, a sense of duty, and the trust of a 6-year-old prince who'd been called a thief. The odds weren't in his favor, but some battles were worth fighting. Even when you knew the cost, and protecting Prince Louis from a bully, no matter who that bully was, related to was one of those battles. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats. But tonight, David. Mitchell stood his post with his head high, because some things mattered more than job security, Things like honor, integrity, protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. And as long as he wore this uniform, he would stand for those things, no matter what came next. Morning arrived with gray skies and heavy rain. David reported for duty at 6, as he always did. But the palace felt different, tense, like everyone was waiting for something to happen. It didn't take long at 7:30. David was reassigned. No explanation. Just new orders delivered by a junior officer who wouldn't meet his eyes. His new post was the service entrance, the least prestigious position in palace security, where deliveries came in, where staff entered through the back, as far from the royal family as possible without being dismissed entirely. The message was clear. This was punishment, a warning. David accepted the assignment without complaint. He stood at the service entrance in the rain, his red uniform getting soaked, watching delivery trucks come and go. Other guards passed by, some nodding in support, most avoiding eye contact. Around 10. Rachel appeared with an umbrella. "You look miserable," she said, holding it over both of them. "I'm fine. You're standing in the rain, guarding a garbage entrance." "You're not fine." She lowered her voice. "Tom's been busy. He spent an hour with Camilla this morning. Private meeting. Word is, she's furious about what happened. I did my job." "I know. But that doesn't matter to them." Rachel hesitated. "There's something else. Tom's watch. The one that was supposedly stolen? What about it?" "It turned up this morning, in his coat pocket, right where it had been the whole time." David stared at her. "So he lied. He accused Louis of theft, terrorized a 6-year-old, and the watch was in his pocket the entire time." "Looks that way. But he's claiming he must have overlooked it in the moment, that it was an honest mistake." "It's not an honest mistake, Rachel." David stopped himself. Guards didn't make accusations against family members, not if they wanted to keep their jobs. But rage was building in his chest. Tom Parker Bowles had deliberately frightened a child over a watch that was never missing. And now he was calling it a mistake? "Has anyone told Louis?" David asked. "I don't know." David made a decision. "I'm going to request a formal investigation. Tom needs to be held accountable." Rachel grabbed his arm. "David, no. That's career suicide. You request an investigation into the Queen Consort's son, and you're done. Not just here, everywhere. Then I'm done. But I can't let this go, Rachel. He's a bully. And he's targeting that little boy because he knows he can get away with it." "Why? Why would he do that?" David had been thinking about this all night. Because Louis is third in line to the throne? Because Tom's mother is Queen Consort, but her bloodline doesn't inherit? Because every time Tom sees those kids, he's reminded that they have something he never will. Real royal status. Real power when they grow up. So this is about jealousy? This is about a man who feels overlooked, taking it out on a child who can't fight back. David's voice was hard, and I'm not going to stand by and watch it happen. Before Rachel could respond, a black car pulled up to the service entrance. Someone important. The kind of arrival that didn't usually use the back way. The door opened. Princess Catherine stepped out. She wasn't supposed to be here. She and Prince William were meant to be in Scotland for 3 more days. But here she was, dressed simply, no makeup, exhaustion visible on her face. She'd clearly traveled through the night. Her eyes found David immediately. "Sergeant Mitchell, I need to speak with you now." David's heart pounded. "Yes, ma'am." She led him through the service corridors, away from prying eyes and listening ears. They ended up in a small private sitting room that staff rarely used. Catherine closed the door and turned to face him. Her expression was fury barely contained. "Tell me what happened with Tom Parker Bowles and my son. Everything." David recounted the incident. Every detail. The yelling. The accusation. The tears on Louis's face. The watch that had never been missing. Catherine's hands clenched into fists as she listened. "And you were reassigned because you intervened?" "Yes, ma'am. I've been moved to the service entrance." "Who authorized that?" "I don't know, ma'am. The order came down this morning." Catherine's jaw tightened. Let me guess. Tom complained to Camilla. Camilla complained to the household staff, and suddenly you're being punished for protecting my son. It appears that way, ma'am. This is unacceptable. Catherine started pacing, her anger palpable. We've been dealing with this for months. Tom's comments, his little digs at the children, his need to remind them that his mother is queen consort. But this accusing Louis of theft, terrorizing him, this crosses every line. Your Royal Highness, if Louis needs to know, the watch was found. He's been carrying that accusation. He needs to know he was right. Catherine stopped pacing. Her expression softened slightly. You really care about him, don't you? I've watched him grow up, ma'am. He's a good kid. Kind, honest. He doesn't deserve any of this. No, he doesn't. Catherine's voice was steel again. And neither do you. You protected my son when a grown man was bullying him. You did exactly what you were supposed to do, and you're being punished for it. I knew the risks, ma'am. That doesn't make it right. She pulled out her phone. I'm calling William. And then I'm calling the palace administrator. Your reassignment is being reversed immediately. Ma'am, I don't want to cause more problems. You're not causing problems, Sergeant. You're exposing them. There's a difference. She paused, her expression thoughtful. Would you be willing to give a formal statement about what happened? For the record, David hesitated. A formal statement meant no going back. It meant officially documenting Tom Parker Bowles' behavior, making it real, permanent. It also meant painting an even bigger target on his back. Yes, ma'am, David said finally. I'll give a statement. Catherine nodded. Thank you. This isn't easy what you're doing. Standing up to powerful people never is, but it matters. More than you know. She made her calls, her voice clipped and authoritative. David could hear Prince William on the other end, his anger matching his wife's. Within an hour, David was reassigned back to the children's wing. His regular post, where he belonged, but the palace was buzzing now. Word had spread. The Princess of Wales had returned early. She'd personally intervened. She'd reinstated a guard who'd been punished for protecting her son. The battle lines were being drawn. Tom Parker Bowles was nowhere to be seen. But David knew he was there. Somewhere in the palace, planning his next move. That evening, David stood outside Louis's bedroom as the prince got ready for bed. When the door opened, Louis saw him, and his whole face lit up. You're back. Mummy said you would be. She said you were a hero. David knelt down. Your Highness, there's something I need to tell you. About the watch. Louis's smile faded. What about it? It was never missing. Tom found it in his coat pocket this morning. It was there the whole time. Louis stared at him, processing this. So he lied? He said I took it, but he had it all along? Yes. Why would he do that? How do you explain adult cruelty to a 6-year-old? How do you tell a child that sometimes people hurt others simply because they can? I don't know, Your Highness, but I want you to understand something. You were right. You told the truth, and that matters. Louis nodded slowly. Then, in a small voice, is he going to do it again? Say mean things? David couldn't lie. I don't know. But if he does, you tell me, or your parents, or any guard you trust. You don't have to face it alone. Will you be here? To protect me? David looked into those trusting eyes and made a promise he hoped he could keep. I'll be here, Your Highness. As long as I can be, I'll be here. Louis hugged him again, that quick. A fierce hug of a child who'd been scared and was now relieved, as David returned to his post. He knew the fight was far from over. Tom Parker Bowles had been embarrassed, exposed. Men like that didn't forgive. They retaliated, and next time David might not see it coming. 3 days of silence. Tom Parker Bowles hadn't been seen at the palace since Catherine's return. No visits, no calls, nothing. But David knew better than to relax. This was the quiet before the storm. He'd given his formal statement to palace security. Every detail documented, every word Tom had said. The way Louis had cried, the watch that was never missing. Prince William had read the statement personally. then called David into his office. Sergeant Mitchell William had said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Thank you for protecting my son. What Tom did was inexcusable, and I promise you, there will be consequences. But consequences for powerful people move slowly. If they moved at all, David returned to his routine, standing guard, watching over the children's wing, being present but invisible, the way royal guards were trained to be. On the fourth day, everything changed. David was at his post when he heard shouting. Coming from the courtyard below, angry voices. The sound of something breaking, he moved to the window. Down in the private courtyard, he could see Tom Parker Bowles. He was arguing with someone from palace administration. His face was red. His gestures wild. Rachel appeared beside David. He's being banned from palace grounds. William and Catherine made it official this morning. Tom's not allowed within 100 yards of any royal residence. How did he react? About as well as you'd expect, Rachel pointed. Security's escorting him out now. David watched as 2 guards approached Tom. He was still yelling, still arguing, but the guards were firm, professional, unyielding. Tom turned toward the palace, his face contorted with rage. For a moment, David could have sworn Tom was looking directly at him. Eye contact across the distance. A promise. A threat. Then Tom was gone, escorted through the palace gates. David exhaled slowly. It was over. Tom was banned. Louis was safe, but relief didn't come, because David knew men like Tom Parker Bowles. They didn't accept defeat. They found ways to strike back when you weren't looking. 2 weeks passed. Quiet weeks. Louis was happier, more relaxed. He'd stopped flinching when doors opened, stopped looking over his shoulder in hallways. Catherine had taken time to speak with David personally. What you did took courage. Real courage. We won't forget it. David had simply nodded. He didn't need thanks. He needed Louis to be safe. But on a Thursday afternoon, when the palace was busy with preparations for an upcoming state dinner, David's phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You ruined my life. Now I'll ruin yours." David stared at the screen. The message was anonymous, but he knew who'd sent it. He showed it to Commander Walsh immediately. Walsh's expression darkened. "This is a direct threat. I'm reporting it, and I'm recommending increased security protocols for you."
"All right, for me, sir."
"You embarrassed a powerful man, David. Made him look like a bully. Got him banned from palace grounds. Men like that hold grudges." Walsh leaned forward. "Take this seriously. Watch your back. Vary your routines. And report anything unusual immediately." David left Walsh's office feeling uneasy. He was a protector, not someone who needed protecting. But the message kept replaying in his mind. "Now, I'll ruin yours." That night, David finished his shift and headed home. He lived in a small flat in South London, 30-minute tube ride from the palace. The journey was routine, familiar. But tonight, David found himself watching the other passengers more carefully. Looking for faces that seemed too interested, eyes that lingered too long. He was being paranoid. He knew that. But the message had gotten under his skin. He reached his flat, unlocked the door, and stepped inside. Everything looked normal, exactly as he'd left it that morning. But something felt wrong. David moved through the flat slowly. Living room, nothing. Kitchen, nothing. Bedroom, he stopped. His dresser drawer was open. Slightly. Just an inch. David always closed his drawers completely. Always. 16. Years of military training had made him meticulous about such things. Someone had been in his flat. David checked carefully. Nothing was missing. Nothing obviously disturbed. But someone had been here, going through his things, searching for something or planting something. David called Walsh immediately. "Sir, someone broke into my flat. Are you certain?" "Yes, sir." Small signs. Things moved. They were careful, but they were here. Did they take anything? "I don't think so. But I haven't checked everywhere yet. I'm sending a security team. Get out of the flat." Now, David left, standing outside on the street until the security team arrived. They swept the flat thoroughly, checked for listening devices, cameras, anything that might have been planted. They found nothing. But the lead investigator pulled David aside. Someone was definitely here. We found tool marks on your lock. Professional job. They knew what they were doing. What were they looking for? That's the question, isn't it? The investigator's expression was grim. Could be surveillance. Could be intimidation. Could be they planted something we haven't found yet. That night, David stayed in a hotel, the palace arranged. He barely slept. Every sound made him alert. Every shadow felt like a threat. This was psychological warfare. Tom couldn't touch him physically. Couldn't get him fired now that William and Catherine were watching. So he was trying to break David mentally. Make him afraid. Make him quit. The next morning, David returned to duty. He said nothing about the break-in to anyone except Walsh and Rachel. But his eyes were sharper now. More watchful. Around noon, Rachel pulled him aside. There's a problem. A rumor's spreading through the palace. What kind of rumor? Rachel's expression was uncomfortable. Someone's saying you have a drinking problem. That you showed up to work drunk last month. That palace security is investigating you. David felt cold anger wash through him. That's a complete lie. Hey, I know. But the rumor's detailed, specific? Someone's put real effort into making it sound credible. Tom probably, but he's smart. He's doing it through proxies. People who don't even know they're being used to spread lies. This was Tom's revenge. He couldn't get David fired through official channels. So he was destroying David's reputation instead, making people question him, doubt him. What do I do? David asked. What you've been doing? Your job? Flawlessly. Be beyond reproach. Let your record speak for itself. Rachel paused. But David, this is going to get worse before it gets better. Men like Tom don't stop until they win or until they're completely destroyed. That afternoon, David noticed the change. Other guards were distant. Staff members whispered when he passed. The looks were subtle. He saw them. Doubt. Suspicion. The poison of rumor taking hold. David stood at his post outside the children's wing, his uniform perfect, his bearing professional. But inside, he was fighting a battle on multiple fronts. Against a man with resources and connections, against lies that spread faster than truth. Against his own growing fear that Tom might actually win. As the day ended, Louis passed by with his nanny. He waved at David cheerfully, completely unaware of the war being fought around him. David waved back, managing a smile. That smile, that wave, that innocent trust, that's what he was fighting for. Not his reputation, not his career, but that child's right to feel safe in his own home. And as long as Louis needed protection, David would stand guard, no matter what Tom Parker Bowles threw at him, no matter what it cost. Some battles were worth fighting. Even when you were outmatched, even when you were fighting alone, even when you knew the enemy would never stop coming. The rumors grew like weeds. By the end of the week, David had heard 3 different versions of the drinking story, each one more elaborate than the last. Each one designed to make him look unstable, unreliable, dangerous. Someone claimed they'd smelled alcohol on his breath. Another said he'd been stumbling during duty. A third insisted he'd been seen leaving a pub during work hours. All lies. All calculated. All impossible to prove false because they were based on someone said. Rather than evidence, David submitted to random drug and alcohol testing. Passed with perfect results. But the rumors didn't stop. They just shifted. Maybe he wasn't drinking now, but he had been. Maybe he was hiding it better. Maybe the tests were wrong. Walsh called him in again. The formal investigation found nothing. You're completely clean. But David, the rumors are doing damage. People are questioning whether you should be around the royal children, whether you're stable enough for palace duty. This is exactly what Tom wants. No. But perception matters. And right now, the perception is that you're a liability. Walsh rubbed his temples. Prince William has asked for daily reports on your conduct. He's trying to protect you, but he's also under pressure from Camilla. The Queen Consort is involved now. Tom is her son. She believes his version of events. That you attacked him verbally, humiliated him, got him banned from the palace unjustly. Walsh's voice dropped. She's been asking questions about you. Your background. Your psychological evaluations. She's building a case to have you removed. David felt the walls closing in. So what do I do? Stay perfect. Stay clean. And pray that nothing else goes wrong. But something did go wrong. 3 days later, during a routine security check, palace computers were breached. Someone accessed confidential files about the royal family's schedules, movements, and security protocols. The investigation traced the breach to a single access point, a computer in the guards' common room. The computer David had used the night before to file his incident reports. Within hours, David was suspended pending investigation. Not fired, not charged, but removed from duty while digital forensics examined his workstation, his personal devices, his entire digital footprint. David sat in his flat, suspended, watching his career disintegrate. He knew he hadn't accessed those files, knew he hadn't breached security, but someone had used his login credentials to do exactly that. Rachel visited him that evening, risking her own position to show support. "It's a setup," she said flatly. "Everyone knows it's a setup. Tom somehow got your login information and used it to breach the system. Can they prove that? I don't know. Digital forensics is still working on it. But David, this is bad. Security breaches are taken incredibly seriously. If they can't prove you didn't do it, then I'm done." Okay, Rachel nodded grimly. "And Tom wins? He gets revenge for being banned. He destroys the guard who stood up to him. And he sends a message to everyone else. Don't cross the Queen Consort's family." David sat in silence, feeling the weight of defeat settling over him. He'd tried to do the right thing. Protect a child. Stand up to a bully. And now his entire life was being systematically destroyed by someone with more power, more resources, and no conscience. "There has to be a way to fight back," David said. "Some way to prove Tom did this. Unless he made a mistake. Unless he left a digital trail that forensics can find. I don't see how." Rachel's voice was gentle. "I'm sorry, David, I really am." After she left, David sat alone in his flat. The place that had been broken into. The home that no longer felt safe. He thought about giving up. About resigning. About walking away from this nightmare and starting over somewhere else. But then he thought about Louis. About that 6-year-old boy who'd been called a thief. Who'd cried in a playroom while a grown man loomed over him. Who'd hugged David and called him a hero. David couldn't walk away. Not yet. He pulled out his phone and did something he'd never done before. He called a journalist. Someone he'd met years ago during a public royal event. Someone known for investigating palace scandals. "Emma, it's David Mitchell. I need to talk to you about a story. About bullying. About abuse of power. About what really happens behind palace walls." The meeting happened the next evening in a quiet cafe far from palace grounds. Emma Chen was sharp, skeptical, and hungry for truth. David told her everything. The incident with Louis, the threats, the break-in, the rumors, the security breach. All of it. Emma took notes, asked pointed questions, and finally sat back. "This is explosive, but it's also dangerous. For both of us. If I publish this, Tom Parker Bowles will come after me too. And you'll be accused of violating palace confidentiality agreements. I know, so why do it? Because a 6-year-old child is being targeted by a man who should protect him. Because palace staff are too afraid to speak up. Because someone needs to tell the truth about what's happening." Emma studied him for a long moment. "You're willing to lose everything for this? I've already lost everything. My career's over whether I speak up or stay silent. At least this way, the truth comes out." Emma nodded slowly. "Give me a week. I need to verify everything, find corroborating sources, build a case that can't be dismissed. Can you hold on that long?" "I'll try." But holding on was harder than David expected. The investigation into the security breach dragged on. His suspension continued. Bills started piling up. His savings dwindled, and the palace rumor mill kept grinding. New stories emerged. He'd been fired from a previous job. He had a history of mental instability. He'd been obsessed with the royal children in an unhealthy way. Each lie built on the last. Each one making it harder for people to remember the truth. Rachel was one of the few who still visited. "William and Catherine are fighting for you," she said, "but they're being blocked at every turn. Camilla has convinced the king that this is a security issue, not a personal one, that you're a genuine threat." "What about Louis? Does he know what's happening?" Rachel's expression softened. "He asks about you every day. Wants to know when you're coming back. Catherine has been trying to explain it in terms a 6-year-old can understand, but it's hard."
Ow.
David felt his throat tighten. Tell him I'm okay, that I'm still thinking about him. I will." 1 week later, Emma's article published. Not in a tabloid, but in a respected newspaper with a reputation for serious investigative journalism. The headline was damning. "Queen Consort's son accused of bullying royal child, orchestrating revenge campaign against palace guard." The article detailed everything. Tom's accusation against Louis, the watch that was never missing, David's intervention, Tom's ban from palace grounds, and then the systematic campaign to destroy David's reputation and career. Emma had found corroborating sources. Other palace staff who'd witnessed Tom's behavior. Digital experts who questioned the security breach findings. Even a former IT consultant who suggested how someone with resources could have stolen David's login credentials. The article exploded. Within hours, it was the top story on every news site. Social media erupted. Public opinion swung sharply against Tom Parker Bowles and, by extension, Queen Camilla for protecting him. Palace phones rang constantly. Journalists camped outside the gates. The pressure was immense. David watched it all unfold from his flat. Phone silenced, feeling both vindicated and terrified. He'd told the truth. But he'd also broken the ultimate palace rule. Never speak to the press. Never air internal matters publicly. His career was definitely over now. But maybe, just maybe, Louis would be safer because of it. That evening, David received a call from an unlisted number. He almost didn't answer. Sergeant Mitchell. The voice was calm, authoritative, familiar. "Prince William, Your Royal Highness. Calling to tell you personally, the investigation into the security breach has been completed. You've been cleared of all charges. The breach was traced to an external source using stolen credentials. You'll be reinstated immediately with full back pay." David felt relief flood through him. "Thank you, sir. Don't thank me. Thank the truth. And thank your courage in speaking it." William's voice hardened. "What Tom did to my son, what he did to you, it was unacceptable. The article today confirmed everything we suspected but couldn't prove. There will be consequences. Real ones? And the palace confidentiality agreement, sir? I spoke to the press. You spoke the truth when no one else would. That matters more than protocol." Pause. "Catherine and I want you to know you protected our son when he needed it most. That's something we'll never forget. Your position here is secure. And if anyone gives you trouble about this, they'll answer to me personally." After the call ended, David sat in silence, processing everything. He'd been cleared, reinstated, protected by the future. King Tom's campaign had failed, but David knew this wasn't truly over. Men like Tom didn't forgive. They waited, planned, struck when you least expected it. Still, for now, David had one. Louis was safe. The truth was public. Justice, however imperfect, had been served, and tomorrow David would return to his post. He would stand guard outside the children's wing. He would protect the young prince who'd called him a hero. Because that's what royal guards did. They protected. They served. They stood firm when others would fall back. Even when the cost was everything they had. Even when the enemy was powerful beyond measure. Even when standing firm meant standing alone. Some battles were worth fighting. Some children were worth protecting. Some truths were worth telling, no matter the price. And David Mitchell had proven he was willing to pay that price. For honor. For justice. For a 6-year-old boy who deserved better than the cruelty of powerful men. The fight wasn't over. But this round belonged to the truth. And sometimes that was enough. David returned to duty on a Monday morning. The palace felt different. The whispers had changed. Where before there had been doubt and suspicion, now there was respect, curiosity, and from some admiration. He'd stood up to power and survived. That meant something in a place where most people kept their heads down and their mouths shut. Rachel met him at the entrance, a rare smile on her face. "Welcome back, sir. Your post is waiting." David nodded, adjusting his red uniform. Everything back in its proper place. But he wasn't the same guard who'd left 3 weeks ago. He'd seen how quickly a life could be destroyed, how truth could be buried under layers of lies, how power protected its own. He walked through the familiar corridors toward the children's wing. Staff members nodded respectfully. A few even said, "Welcome back." Small gestures that meant everything. When David reached his post outside Lewis's playroom, he stopped. The door was open. Inside, he could hear children's laughter. Louis and his siblings was playing some elaborate game involving toy soldiers and stuffed animals. Commander Walsh approached, his stern face softening slightly. "Glad to have you back, Sergeant. The children have been asking about you, thank you, sir. There's something you should know." Walsh's voice dropped. "The king has issued a formal statement. Tom Parker Bowles is permanently banned from all royal properties. No exceptions. And there's been a quiet policy change. Any allegations of bullying or misconduct involving the royal children will now be investigated immediately by an independent panel. Of what happened with Louis? Because of what you did. You forced change, Mitchell. Real change. That doesn't happen often in this institution." After Walsh left, David stood at his post, processing those words. He'd thought he was just protecting one child. But apparently, he'd done more than that. He'd exposed a problem that had been festering in silence. And now policies were changing to prevent it from happening again. The door opened. Louis emerged, saw David, and his entire face lit up. "Sergeant Mitchell." "You're back." David knelt, as he always did, bringing himself to the prince's eye level. "Hello, Your Highness." "I hear you've been asking about me." "Every day. Mummy said you had to go away for a while, but that you'd come back. She said you're the bravest person she knows." David felt emotion catch in his throat. "Your mother is very kind. She's right, though." Louis's voice was serious. "You protected me, even when it got you in trouble. That's what brave means. You're brave too, Your Highness. You told the truth even when someone scary was yelling at you. That took real courage." Louis smiled, then hugged David quickly. "I'm glad you're back. It didn't feel safe without you here." As Louis returned to his play, David stood, his purpose crystallizing. This was why he'd fought. This was why he'd risked everything. So a 6-year-old boy could feel safe in his own home. That afternoon, Princess Catherine requested to see David privately. He was escorted to her sitting room, the same place they'd spoken weeks ago when this had all started. Catherine stood when he entered. "Sergeant Mitchell, please, sit." David sat, and Catherine sat across from him, her expression thoughtful. "I wanted to speak with you personally, to thank you, and to apologize. You have nothing to apologize for, ma'am. Do. You were put through hell because you protected my son. Your career was nearly destroyed. Your reputation was attacked. Your safety was compromised." Her voice was thick with emotion. "All because you did what was right? I'd do it again, ma'am. I know you would. That's what makes this so important." Catherine leaned forward. "David, what Tom did to Louis, what he tried to do to you, exposed something rotten in this palace. A culture where people are too afraid to speak up, where power protects itself at any cost. With respect, ma'am, that's how institutions like this survive. By protecting themselves, perhaps. But it's also how institutions rot from within." Catherine's expression was determined. "William and I have been talking. We want to make changes. Real changes. And we'd like your input on how to do that. David was surprised. My input, ma'am? You're someone who stood up when it mattered. Someone who saw a problem and didn't look away. That's exactly the kind of perspective we need. She handed him a folder. We're establishing a new position. Protection liaison for the royal children. Someone who advocates specifically for the children's safety and well-being. Someone who has the authority to raise concerns without fear of retaliation. David opened the folder. Inside was a job description. A formal offer. A significant promotion. You want me to take this position? If you're willing? I know what you've been through. I know this might be the last thing you want. More responsibility, more scrutiny. But you've proven you're someone we can trust. Someone Louis trusts. David looked at the papers, then at Catherine. Can I ask you something, ma'am? Of course. Will this actually change anything? Or is it just a title to make people feel better while everything stays the same? Catherine didn't look offended by the bluntness. Instead, she nodded. That's exactly why we need you in this role. Because you'll ask those questions. Push back when needed. Make sure this isn't just theater. David thought about it. About Louis? About all the other royal children growing up in this palace? About the staff members who saw problems but stayed silent out of fear. I'll do it, he said finally. On one condition. Name it. I want the authority to report directly to you and Prince William. No intermediaries. No filters. If I see a problem, I need to be able to raise it without going through channels that might bury it. Catherine smiled. Done. You'll have that authority. And our full support. The new role began immediately. David spent the next week's meeting with palace staff, reviewing protocols, building a system where concerns about the children could be raised safely and investigated thoroughly. He discovered that Tom's behavior toward Louis hadn't been an isolated incident. There had been other moments over the years, comments, small cruelties, but staff had been too afraid to report them. David documented everything, built a case that would have made Tom's permanent ban justified even without the incident David had witnessed. And he made sure that system was in place so that if something like this ever happened again, there would be no question about what to do. 3 months passed. The palace settled into a new normal. The public interest in the story faded. Life moved forward. But David noticed the small changes. Staff spoke up more. Problems were addressed faster. There was less fear hanging in the air. One afternoon, David was doing his rounds when he found Louis sitting alone in the library, reading. The prince looked up and smiled. Hello, Sergeant Mitchell, Your Highness. David paused. What are you reading? Louis held up a book about historical heroes. It's about people who stood up for what's right, even when it was hard. Sounds like a good book. It is. It made me think of you. Louis closed the book. Can I ask you something? Always were you scared? When you stood up to Tom? When everything bad was happening? David considered lying, telling the prince that guards were never scared. That duty made you fearless. But Louis deserved the truth. Yes, David said. I was scared. Very scared, but you did it anyway. Yes. Why? David knelt beside the prince's chair. Because some things are more important than being scared. Like making sure you were safe. Like standing up for what's right. Being brave doesn't mean you're not afraid. It means you do what needs to be done even when you are afraid. Louis nodded seriously. Mummy says I'm going to be king someday. A long, long time from now. She says I need to learn to be strong. To protect people who can't protect themselves. Your mother is right. Will you teach me? How to be brave like that? David felt the weight of that request. This child who'd been terrorized. This future king who was learning what courage really meant. Your Highness, I think you already know how. You stood up to Tom when he accused you. You told the truth, even though you were scared. You already have that strength inside you, Louis smiled. But I had you there to protect me. That made it easier. You'll always have people around you who will protect you. Good people. Loyal people. But the real strength has to come from you. From knowing what's right and standing for it, even when it's hard. Louis thought about this. Then he extended his hand for a formal handshake. "Thank you, Sergeant Mitchell, for protecting me, and for teaching me what real courage looks like." David shook the small hand, feeling the significance of the moment. This child would one day be king, and the lessons he learned now about justice, about standing up to bullies, about the importance of protecting the vulnerable would shape the kind of monarch he would become. That evening, as David finished his shift, he stood in the palace corridor one last time before heading home. The same corridor where this had all started, where he'd heard Louis crying, where he'd made the choice to intervene. He thought about everything that had happened since. The threats, the lies, the investigation, the vindication. It had cost him. Sleepless nights, constant stress, the fear that he'd lose everything. But looking back, he wouldn't change a thing. Because when a child needed protection, when injustice needed challenging, truth needed speaking, someone had to stand up. And David Mitchell had proven that one person, standing firm, could make a difference. Even against powerful enemies. Even at great personal cost. Even in a palace where tradition valued silence over justice, he'd protected Prince Louis. But more than that, he'd shown everyone watching that courage still mattered. That standing up for what's right was worth the price. That even in institutions built on power and hierarchy, individual conscience could prevail. As David walked out of the palace into the London evening, he smiled. His uniform was crisp. His conscience was clear. His purpose was renewed. He was a royal guard, a protector, a defender of justice. And tomorrow, he would return to his post and continue the work that mattered. Not for glory, not for recognition, but because somewhere in that palace, a 6-year-old prince was sleeping soundly, knowing that people like David would always stand between him and those who would do him harm. And that, more than any title or promotion or public praise, was worth everything. Some battles were won with swords, some with words, some simply by refusing to look away when a child needed help. David Mitchell had fought all 3 kinds of battles, and he'd won where it mattered most. In the heart of a young prince who would never forget the guard who taught him what courage really meant, and in a palace where, from that day forward, the children would always have someone willing to stand up for them. Someone who proved that doing what's right was always worth the cost. Always.